Chris Richardson here once again, and I had made a promise to give make a couple of clips specific to number one, war. What we've been doing with war, and what we have been promising with war, and war is not an answer. War is an aberration that comes about when certain individuals at a high level, or the oligarchs, for instance, want a resource that belongs to somebody else. And by creating a war, we get access to that resource. Or we can keep a resource from helping people that really need it. And there's a bunch of that going around right now in the Ukrainian escapade, which is answering an awful lot of little questions that the oligarchs have as to, how are we going to make Russia weaker? How are we going to cause famine in Europe? How are we going to get Europe to pay our prices for our dirty tar sand? Well, the Russians were providing very cheap oil to the industries of Europe, and then we started this little fracas where we ousted the legitimate government of Ukraine and replaced it with one of the most corrupt governments known to man. And we have generated lots of weaponry and sent it to Ukraine. Over $150 billion worth of weapons, and more than 50% of it went on the black market almost immediately. And it fed a number of disgruntled groups in Europe who want to cause trouble for the duly elected governments in Europe. And so we've become the seeds of that kind of destruction and interruption of legitimate flow of information and goods. Well, also Ukraine is the breadbasket for most of Europe and much of the world. And while they're fighting the Russians, they aren't growing winter wheat, and they are not growing the crops that fed so much of the world. And so famine is coming. The other writer of the apocalypse. We keep playing into the hands of the people that are wish us ill, and it's not making us any friends anywhere. We have sanctions against governments and people that are really pretty reasonable folks. Venezuela, for one, we have their wealth tied up in our country, Canada, and the UK for decades. We've been doing this for decades. We've kept them poor and away from their own resources. And we have sanctions on them to keep them from selling their oil on the market. And their oil is excellent. It is the source of the element vanadium. There is an industry built up from the scraping of the smokestacks of freighters that burn Venezuelan oil, because that oil is from primitive sea squirts, oddly enough. They used to carpet the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and when an asteroid impacted Gulf of Mexico back in about 265 million years ago, that was the basis for their oil supply. And one of the things about sea squirts, they concentrate vanadium out of the seawater, about 250,000 times more concentrated than what it is in seawater. And it's part of their blood, and their blood went into making the Venezuelan oil, which is extremely high quality. And we have kept them from selling it because we want a unique source for energy for everybody. So, and that's what the petrodollar was all about. But now the petrodollar is not the only media for buying energy. There's the petro yuan and there's a petro ruble. They all, the Russians are a source of oil, and the Chinese also produce some oil, but nowhere near as much as the Russians. And the Russians are now selling it to the Chinese because we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. There was no reason for the Russians to blow it up. It was us. They had control of the taps. They could turn it on or off, depending. And they were perfectly happy with selling that oil to Europe. And it was cheap compared to our tar sands, which are about 7 times the price of the Russian oil. We have Europe in a very uncomfortable place. They have to buy their oil from our tar sands because we won't allow them to buy it from Venezuela. And they're also planning on buying some of the oil that the Russians are now shipping to China because they cannot ship it to Europe. And they're going to buy it from the Chinese. Wonderful. Great timing. Boy, are we doing wonderful things. And we're willing to fight the Russian horde to the last drop of Ukrainian blood. There's a little book that was written back in the 30s called War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. And it's available online. You can download it as a PDF and read it. It's not a terrible long read. And he considers himself a thug for Wall Street. He helped throw out the royal family of Hawaii so that they could turn the government over to the Doles. The Doles became the government of Hawaii. They were the fruit growers in Hawaii, and they took over. And it's American imperialism all over again, and we need to stop doing that. We're hurting a lot of people in the process, and we're destroying cultures in the process. And we need to be opening markets rather than closing them. We have sanctions, which are a really bad idea. It's restraint of trade. It's what's called restraint of trade. That's stopping somebody from actually selling something that other people need so that you can raise the price. You can make it difficult for those other folks to get hold of the resources they need to continue. And in doing so, you put further stress on them. It's really bad business, and the only people that get rich out of war are the oligarchs, the people that start the wars. And they don't spill any blood. They don't hurt. They are not, the banks never get punished for the damage that they're doing. And we can always turn around and start another war, but we can't help our own people. What is wrong with that picture? The success of a government is keyed to how they treat the worst, the lowest level of survival of the people of that country. And we're not doing a very good job. We are putting people under such stress, and it's bringing on death at an early age. It's like we don't really even care, except that we should be, and we need to stop our imperialism. And our imperialism is nothing but death, and we need to stop it. Okay, well, on that note, let's go into the next clip, which I'm going to start right now.